So, finally, the promised 3 meals that make it all very, very easy. That make it automatic, that make it so that, if you're doing Gregor's Daily Dozen boxes, take 3 solid meals like this, and you'll find that those boxes start filling up with check marks really easily, and at the end of the day, there's not many left, if any. So, smoothie. I've mentioned that a lot. I know there's some controversy around smoothies, so I will get to that in a minute. But to me, it's such an easy sell because of what you can get, the vehicle that a smoothie is for all this good stuff, and so much of it raw when, we get plenty of cooked stuff. That's not something we need to focus on usually. So we get to start our day with all this raw stuff, berries, other fruits, flax seeds, and other nuts. And that left column, by the way, is the foundation of my everyday smoothie and the one I give to my kids. It's a bunch of mixed berries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, a couple bananas, flax seeds, and then some walnuts. And that's the foundation. Usually I'll throw some greens in there as well. And that's a smoothie that kids like and drink. It doesn't taste like greens. It doesn't taste like nuts. It just tastes like good fruit stuff. And you don't need any yogurt or anything else in there to make a really, really delicious breakfast. As I mentioned, throwing green or white tea in is an option. You can throw turmeric in the smoothie. You'll taste it a little bit. I wouldn't put the ground stuff in there, but the root, which doesn't have quite as potent a flavor, you'll taste it. It makes your smoothie taste different, but I wouldn't say it tastes any worse. It's just noticeable. We talked about getting beans for breakfast. Here's another way that we didn't mention. You can actually get them. You can put silken tofu in your smoothie, which will contribute to the texture, not really add much at all in the way of flavor, and get you another serving of beans in the morning. I've even heard of some bodybuilders who are trying to get more and more calories will put white beans in their smoothie. Apparently white beans are the ones that have the least taste in the smoothie. I haven't tested that myself. That to me is where I won't go to that point. But silken tofu I've done, and it works fine. Actually, let me go back. Here's one more evidence of how good smoothies are. I mean, look how happy that woman is. She's doing totally fine. She's also demonstrating how not to make a smoothie because she's overflowing the jar massively. I don't know what she's expecting is going to happen there. Back to this for controversy. I know there are a lot of people who are saying maybe we shouldn't drink smoothies because they allow us to get way more calories or more calories than we would if we were to just eat a plate full of berries, other fruits, flax seeds, other nuts, greens, white tea, turmeric, and beans. My argument to that is, yes, I agree, that is true. We drink more in the smoothie because the caloric density is higher in terms of how much calories in a given amount of space. We've shrunken the amount of space it takes up in our stomach by blending it. And it's just drinkable. It's easier to get down a whole lot of it. For some people, that's good. For athletes, that's a good thing. And for some people who are concerned about health, I'm not even convinced that's a bad thing. All this great stuff, maybe more is better. I don't know for sure. But my argument, stronger argument, is that yes, it's true that maybe a plate full of this stuff is better than a smoothie for breakfast. But realistically, is that really what the alternative is? Is it a smoothie or a plate full of this stuff, or is it a smoothie or an Egg McMuffin? And I think for people at the beginning, it's the latter. It's not, yes, if you can go with this for a while and take some small steps and over a few years get to the point where you're really happy eating a plate full of this stuff for breakfast, that's wonderful. Or a breakfast salad, go for it. But I think people who are more at the beginning, a smaller, easier step is start with the smoothie. It tastes really good, and maybe it's 99% or 98% of the best you could possibly do by eating fully whole foods that aren't blended. But to me, that's totally worth it. And this woman agrees. All right, number 2, I've mentioned it lots of times. We're pretty close to wrapping up here because I know we are hungry. The giant salad with beans and nut-based dressing. This is my go-to lunch. So if the smoothie is the go-to breakfast for me, and lots of variety, I didn't mention that, but you can change in and out lots of the fruits and berries and things so that you get a different smoothie every morning if that's your goal. Similar with salad. Salad for lunch, to me, is the everyday go-to lunch. And when I say every day, it doesn't mean I literally eat these things every day. I mean, I need some variety too. Maybe some days my wife and I want to go out for lunch for some reason. Or maybe we have leftovers from our dinner that made extra. Like every day can still account for that stuff sometimes. It's fine to have those things as long as you make this or a plan your everyday, your fallback, your automatic thing, your default, so that when you have those little deviations, it's totally fine because you know that you'll go back to normal after that. So this is my salad that I aim to eat every day. The beans help to make it, aside from getting you another serving of beans, they help to make it feel like a meal. And if it's still not enough of a meal for you, and I promise you will be full if you eat enough of this with beans and nut-based dressing on there, because the nuts are going to pack the calories in, you can add a whole grain roll or something. You could be getting a nice serving of whole grains, or serve it over brown rice or next to brown rice, however you like it. You can just add some good stuff to make a salad into a meal. And again, lots and lots of good raw stuff. Of course, the beans aren't raw, and the whole grains aren't going to be raw, most likely, but you're getting tons of good stuff. And now you're halfway through your day, and you've eaten mostly raw stuff, and then your dinner can be, doesn't have to be so crazy as this. It can be, good, healthy, cooked food. And I just feel like this is such a good start to the day. The energy you feel is amazing when you eat your first 6 hours of the day this way. So that is my recommended lunch. And finally, for dinner, and I'll mention some snacks in just a minute, but I will defend this till I die. I coined this term a long time ago, 5 years ago or so, a grain, and a bean. It rhymes just like No Meat Athlete does. That's my thing, is making up rhyming names. But then Trader Joe's stole it, and they put it on a frozen meal or something. So they're Robber Joe's, is what I call them. But it is exactly what it sounds like, a grain, and a bean. And I know that sounds boring. Sounds like, how could you eat that every day? That's like the big bowl of sadness that people talk about. They eventually get to the point when they always eat these big mushy bowls of sadness. Yes, this can be that if you don't try to make it not that. But now and then it is good to have that, right? A good, nice one-pot meal where nobody puts forth any effort. You barely have to think about it. You probably have the stuff already in the pantry or the fridge, and you can just make it. You cook the grain first if you don't already have it frozen, which is, by the way, side note, have like a grain bank. Have a Saturday where you make a whole bunch of grains. Just put them in serving size packages in the freezer and then use them for meals like this when you don't have time to cook because you got stuck in work or traffic or whatever. So you cook the grain first, typically, then add the beans, and then stir some kind of sauce and the greens in to wilt, and you've got yourself a meal. It really depends on the sauce being good. Other variations of it, which I'll show you in just a second, you can include lots more things, like first starting with onions and garlic, and then adding in a bunch of other stuff, and I've listed here some other things that you can get pretty easily in lots of these meals. So just in case that does sound very, very boring, here are some examples of things that don't seem like it at first, but actually are grain, and bean. So the other night I made a chickpea pasta soup for my book, which started with onions and garlic and celery. Cook that up first. Then add in some vegetable broth, a little bit of tomato sauce, chickpeas, and some pasta. And so now this soup has turned into a grain, a bean, just in a different form, but it's providing that same stuff plus some extra stuff. Hawaiian beans and rice would just be beans and rice with cabbage and pineapple. You get some cruciferous vegetable there. You get some fruit there. Stir fry with tofu and bok choy, another one, now providing a cruciferous and leafy green, along with some kind of rice for your grain and any kind of beans or tofu. The list goes on. I mean, they're very, they don't seem like bowl full of sadness. They're good, different meals, and if you just kind of think of it from this new framework of like, hey, can I make this into a grain, bean meal? Very often you can. All right, so let's finish up here with what I think, I wouldn't say a perfect day, but it's a typical day, and that's why I've put perfect in quotes there. First, smoothie. I like to start with a smoothie. Oatmeal is a totally viable alternative if you're not into smoothies. You can pretty much make the same meal that's just hot instead. You can put the same stuff in there. You can get the same stuff if you're not into smoothies. Morning snack, I usually eat more fruit. If I'm wanting more calories or just feeling hungry, I'll put some nut butter on there. Maybe sometimes it'll be a whole wheat pita with nut butter. I try to get another serving of tea. I like coffee as much as anyone else. And coffee I don't really believe is a bad food. I don't think it's a great one. I think tea is better. But I've never been able to say, like, I'm not going to have that 1 cup of coffee in the morning. So I start still with the 1 cup of coffee, but I've now made the effort to add tea. If I'm going to have like a second cup, usually I'll replace that with tea. And then later in the afternoon, I'll have another cup or two of green tea. Lunch, of course, no surprise here. The giant salad with nut-based dressing, adding to it if you need to make it seem more like a meal. And by the way, these snacks are in here because plant-based foods, plant-based whole foods are not very calorically dense. They will fill your stomach up without a lot of calories in there. So it doesn't take much work for you to quickly digest that and then you're hungry again. So that's why I think it's a good idea typically on a diet like this to let yourself eat fairly often. Afternoon snack, hummus gives you another serving of beans. If you got a bean dish or bean dip of the week, which we do a lot of that stuff in mine, you can make a black bean dip. You can do white bean dips. They're very, very easy. They're basically all hummus recipes, but they're just some don't have tahini and some do. That's kind of my go-to afternoon snack. Another chance to get good cruciferous veggies or other veggies there. Or if I'm in more of a mood for whole grains, more calories, if I'm training harder, I'll make sure I include some, a pita or bread or crackers and dip that in the dip instead. Finally, dinner, grain, and a bean. And I know people like to have their dessert, so we don't really eat dessert in my house, not because we're like opposed to it. It's just no one has that much of a sweet tooth. But like I said, this is not you can't ever deviate from this plan. So I would say plan most of the time, if you have a sweet tooth and you need dessert, have a piece of dark chocolate and a cup of herbal tea, or some berries, or some fruit. If you need to dress it up a little bit, maybe in a way that's not the healthiest, like fine, you can do that. because look at the way you're eating. We go back to that stat, 1 in 25 Americans eat 12 servings of greens in a month. 1 in 25, that's terrible. And all this other stuff is going to be very much the same. It's going to be the same story with onions and beans and flax seeds. Unfortunately, when you think about all these great foods, all this amazing stuff we've gone through, what they can do for you, it's such a sad truth that so few people eat these. Just can count on one hand the number of times they eat these foods in a month. So if you're eating most of your days like this, or even half of your days like this, and you're allowing plenty of room for variation when you want it, then if one Friday night or 2 nights a week you want that Ben & Jerry's vegan ice cream that they make, like, fine. I wouldn't say, like, if you don't make that your default. If you make your default, when you're choosing default, be strict. Make the default stuff healthy. Make it the best choice. And then know that sometimes you can wobble a little bit. You can take the other stuff because you're going to come back to what is the best choice. So that is my spiel. It is time to eat. I hope this meal tastes better than any you've had in a long time because we've just spent 45 minutes talking about how good it all is. Thank you.